Good morning, everybody. Welcome to our hybrid Source Protection Authority in-person and video meeting this morning. First off, concerning this particular meeting, I do need to say our acknowledgements. So, the Niagara Peninsula watershed is situated within the traditional territory of the Haudenosaunee, Attawandaronk, and the Anishinaabe, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, many of whom continue to live and work here today. This territory is covered by the Upper Canada Treaties, number 3, 4, and 381, and is within the land protected by the Dish and One Spoon Wampum Agreement. Today, the watershed is home to many First Nations, Métis, and Inuit peoples. Through the 2021 to 2031 strategic plan, we reconfirm our commitment to shared stewardship of natural resources and deep appreciation of Indigenous culture and history in the watershed. We do have an agenda laid out for us this morning, and I'd like to have approval of that agenda. Member Johnson and Member Wright. Okay. Oh, yeah. Anybody opposed to the agenda this morning? The clerk has informed me that we need to be doing our roll call, so since I did not do that, I will go over to him and we will do a roll call.
Good morning, everyone. Roll call beginning with Member Beatty.
I'm here.
I see him there, but I'm not getting any volume on this end. But Member Brady.
How about now? You got now?
Oh, I got you now, sir. Member
Okay.
Brady. Member Clark. Member Cridland.
Present.
And we have regrets from Member Fior. Member Halinga.
Present.
Member Hewson.
I'm here.
Member Ingrao. Here. Member Johnson.
I'm here.
Member Kaywall.
Here.
Member McKenzie.
Good morning.
Member Metcalf.
Present.
Member Rapley.
Present.
Member Shurton.
Present.
We have regrets from Member Smith, and Member Steele will be joining us later. Member Woodhouse.
Present.
And Member Wright.
Present. Quick question. Is this for the SPA meeting or the full authority meeting?
This is SPA, sir. And of course, Chair Foster.
Thank you.
Great, thank you. Any declarations of conflict of interest this morning? Seeing none. I'd like Member Cridland to move and Member Hewson to second the approval of the minutes of the Source Protection Authority meeting dated April 22nd, 2022. Are there any questions or comments to these minutes? Seeing none, is there anyone opposed to us accepting these minutes? Seeing none, thank you very much. We have no correspondence, no presentations, no delegations, and no consent items. We have one discussion item concerning report number SPA 0222, re SPC member appointment, and there's a confidential report that's circulated under separate cover for members only for adoption in this open session. So, do any members wish to go into closed session to discuss this appointment that's being recommended? I do not see anyone requesting to do that. So with that, I would like Member Shurton to move and Member Woodhouse to second that we approve the report number SPA 0222. Is there anyone who is opposed to that? Seeing none, thank you very much. And that brings us to, well, there is some new business. Does anybody want to bring up any new business under this committee? Seeing none, I will declare this meeting adjourned. Welcome to the full authority meeting this Friday, May the 20th. It is going to be both an online video and an in-person meeting. And welcome everybody. Before we do our call to order, I would like to say the following. The Niagara Peninsula watershed is situated within the traditional territory of the Haudenosaunee, Adirondack, and the Anishinaabe, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, many of whom continue to live and work here today. This territory is covered by the Upper Canada Treaties No. 3, 4, and 381, and was within the land protected by the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Agreement. Today, the watershed is home to many First Nations, Métis, and Inuit peoples. Through the 2021 to 2031 strategic plan, we reconfirm our commitment to shared stewardship of natural resources and deep appreciation of Indigenous culture and history in the watershed. With that, I will turn to the clerk and ask for a roll call.
Thank you. Once again, beginning with Member Beatty. We'll come back to him. Member Brady. Member Clark. Member Cridland.
Present.
We have regrets from Member Fior. Member Halinga.
Present.
Member Hewson.
Present.
Member Ingrao. Member Johnson.
Here.
Member Kaywall.
Here.
Member McKenzie.
Here.
Member Metcalf.
Present.
Member Rapley.
Present.
Member Shurton.
Present.
We have regrets from Member Smith, and Member Steele will be joining us later. Member Woodhouse.
Present.
Member Wright.
Present.
And Chair Foster.
I am present. Well, thank you and good morning, everybody. First off, we'll do approval of our agenda. Are there any changes or any additions required to the agenda this morning? Seeing none. Do we have any declarations of conflict of interest this morning? Seeing none, we will move into our first item, which is approval of minutes. Can I ask Member Kaywall to move and Member McKenzie to second the minutes of the full authority meeting dated April 22nd, 2022? Thank you. Are there any questions to the minutes or any changes that are required? Seeing none, anybody who is opposed to us approving these minutes? Seeing none, thank you. Chair's update. Don't have a lot to offer this morning. I do want to point out we are planning on doing an event at Bench Brewery. It will be a combination of Foundation and NPCA on June the 14th. It will be an evening at Bench from 5 to 8. Bench Brewery, by the way, was a major supporter of the NPCA back earlier. And of course, with some of the issues that had gone on, they had stepped aside. However, we are working to renew that relationship. The intention is to have hopefully all board members at that particular event, as well as the board members of the foundation. Senior staff will be there as well, and there will be invitations to people who have been previous supporters, as well as politicians from in and across Niagara. So the intention is to just basically provide a very lovely evening for everybody to remind them that the NPCA is here and alive and well. So with that, more information will be coming to you shortly on that. Let's move into our section of the agenda, which is correspondence. Member Beatty, would you move that we accept the pieces of correspondence here? And Member Cridland, would you second that, please? Is there any questions or any comments to any of the pieces of correspondence now that we have them moved and seconded? Seeing none. Oh, I'm sorry. Member Cridland, please go ahead.
Thank you. It's just a comment through you, Mr. Chair. I'd just like all our watershed stakeholders to be aware of the 4 summaries that we have here in front of us, and how it highlights both the challenges that NPCA staff and our watershed environment will be facing very, very shortly when all this provincial legislation that is referenced goes through. So thank you for that, Chair.
Thank you, Member Cridlin. Any other questions or comments to this correspondence? Seeing none, is there anyone opposed to us accepting this correspondence? Seeing none, thank you very much. Let us move into presentations. So our first presentation this morning is concerning the European Water Chestnut Rapid Response Program by Karen Alexander. Karen.
Hi, Chair Foster. It's Carrie. I think Karen's having a few technical difficulties this morning. I guess she's not having any sound. So she just tried to log out and log back in. So hopefully she'll be able to get that working.
So, Carrie, would it be okay if we moved forward to the next presentation and come back to that?
I think that would be fine.
Okay, thank you. Our second presentation this morning is the Gonders Flats Wetland Enhancement Project by Natalie Green. Natalie.
Good morning, Chair.
Morning. We hear you fine.
Good morning. Thank you. One moment. I'm just going to share my screen.
Great. We can see that, Natalie. That's great. Thank you.
Wonderful. Just make it bigger. Thank you. Okay. Good morning, and thank you so much for the opportunity to speak today about the exciting new collaborative project with Niagara Parks Commission and several other partners regarding Gonders Flats in Fort Erie. I'd invited my colleague Corey Brandt to join me today to give this presentation and to be able to answer questions. Unfortunately, I told him to join around 10 because I knew there was a presentation before me, so he's not here yet. So hopefully he will join soon and we can get him on the line as well. Next slide. All right. As many of you already know, the Niagara River was identified as an environmentally degraded location called an area of concern in the late 1980s. It's actually one of 43 areas of concern across the Great Lakes in Canada and the United States. The main issues on the Canadian side leading to the Niagara River having this designation is historic water quality problems and habitat loss. The area of concern requires a remedial action plan to guide cleanup efforts on both sides of the border. The NPCA and the Niagara Parks Commission and several other groups have been involved in the Niagara River Remedial Action Plan program since its inception in the 1980s. The NPCA, as you know, took a lead role in coordinating this program in 1999. We work with a lot of different local partners to improve the Niagara River's ecosystem health and water quality. There are 5 remaining environmental challenges that we're working to address, one of which being the loss of habitat in the Niagara River. So partners on both sides of the border have been working together to improve fish and wildlife habitat in the Niagara River. The map on the right-hand side shows all of the sites that have been identified for restoration. The green dots are those that have already been completed, and the orange dots are those that are planned for this year or beyond, some of which are going to be started on the US side this summer. Thanks to Niagara Parks, with funding support from our government partners, all 7 targeted coastal wetland sites on the Canadian side of the Niagara River have been completed, and there is an opportunity to complete one last inland site called the Gonders Flats site to further enhance the habitat at this particular location and to provide that important habitat connectivity between the shoreline riparian inland portion of the site and that coastal wetland component as well. The site is owned and managed by Niagara Parks Commission and is directly adjacent to the Niagara River, as you can see, in the town of Fort Erie. So just some really great news to share so far. Since 2016, Niagara Parks has been leading with funding from external partners the completion of these 7 coastal wetland sites along the Upper Niagara River. So these stats shown on the slide are only for the Canadian side. So far, since 2016 only, approximately 7.5 acres or 3.5 hectares of important coastal wetland habitat has been created. Over 30,000 plants, native plants, have been planted in the riparian or that shoreline area adjacent to the Niagara River. 26 sites have been identified for riparian restoration, with 58% of those locations completed. We already have 80% of the Canadian side vegetated, which is really exciting for a connecting channel and quite special. 30,000 plants I've already mentioned, and nearly 2 kilometers of shoreline habitat has been restored on the Upper Niagara River. The Gonders Flats project that I'm presenting today will add another 4 acres or 1.5 hectares of wetland habitat that's critical for the RAP to achieve its delisting goals. So this is an aerial view of the Gonders Flats site with an overlay of the design concept so you can get a sense of the entire area. The site itself has a potential to be a highly functional wetland. It likely was a wetland many years ago. It's degraded currently because of past land management practices before the Niagara Parks had possession of it. Drainage on site and certain things that were done to change the topography of the site. So it's currently a degraded wetland, and what we're proposing to do is enhance this particular location, provide access to nature, and enhance the habitat and that connectivity for the Niagara River. So I'll go through some of this design concept in a little bit more detail for you in the following slides. So here's an up-close version of that design concept. So phase 1 is already completed. So this is the focus that we were trying to work on previously, the coastal wetland restoration. So phase 1 included the completion of an archaeological assessment, removing an asphalt access road that was eroding into the river, installing these coastal wetland habitat structures. So these are felled ash trees that succumbed to emerald ash borer. They were repurposed for this project and anchored to the riverbed. Boulders have been added, rocks and pebbles. So all of this provides really critical spawning and rearing habitat for fish, and is also beneficial to other wildlife species as well. Niagara Parks has also in phase 1 repaired the Riverside Trail. So what I'm pointing to here, you can probably see, it ends right now just around here. So it's just this access trail from the parking lot to the coastal area. And it is used by the public for walking. It's quite lovely. The riparian area has been planted as part of phase 1. Native pollinator gardens were installed, and educational signage was installed at some key locations as well. So the focus of today's presentation is in the red box shown here. The focus area is the inland portion of the wetland, and is focused just on that habitat restoration. There is a future plans for this site that Niagara Parks will continue, which includes a shade pavilion, a viewing platform, and other visitor amenities like picnic tables. And that will be in the area not shown in the red box because that's outside of the project scope. So this project entails the removal of invasive species and any remaining ash trees that have succumbed to emerald ash borer, unfortunately. So this was an ash-dominated canopy, and many of those are now hazard trees. The excavation of the 1.5 hectare or 4 acre pond, the creation of berms using the excavated soil across the rest of the 2.5 hectare or 6 acre site to create a varied topography. And it will also provide the opportunity to have sight lines to the Niagara River by being able to stand on the berms and being a little bit higher up. None of the excavated soil will be leaving the site. This project will entail the planting of wetland and shoreline vegetation depending on where they're going. There will be different species in the wetland portion or the upland portion. And this will include a community component as well. Wildlife habitat structures will be included, including nesting structures, woody debris, basking logs, an accessible walking trail will be included, and interpretive signage. So the key benefits of this site, there are many, but here are the really key ones. Being able to restore and enhance functional wetland habitat, particularly adjacent to the Niagara River, providing educational opportunities, protecting habitats and sensitive habitats and sensitive species. There are species at risk on this site from invasive species, expanding accessible and passive recreational opportunities in natural areas, and contributing to climate change resiliency. As you might notice, these are a lot of the same goals and benefits that we are seeking to accomplish in our strategic plan as well. So there are a lot of mutual benefits to doing this project. We're really thrilled with the amount of support that we've garnered so far for this project. It's been absolutely incredible. From getting letters of support from different partners, commitments for volunteer plantings and future monitoring, to providing funding, all of these partners are making this project become a reality, and we are so grateful. We have received all the funding that we need to date, and we're really excited to be able to move forward this summer with this project. The total project value, cash and in kind, is estimated at $233,000. The NPCA, through its restoration grant funding program, is providing up to $45,000. We have 2 more funding applications awaiting confirmation that will further reduce, if we're successful, further reduce the cost of the NPCA. The Niagara Parks Commission is providing in-kind support valued at approximately $65,000 and possibly more, depending on the educational signage that will get put in. Ducks Unlimited Canada is providing $30,000 cash, Lion Care Niagara providing $30,000 cash, and the Niagara Community Foundation is supporting this project with $20,000 cash. As I noted, we're still awaiting funding for 2 more sources, and that should bring our costs down. But we have everything secured to be able to move forward. So the timeline. We've been working on this for quite some time. As I mentioned, phase 1 started back in 2017. So the design and archaeological assessment was already completed, which made this a shovel-ready project, ready to get going as soon as we had the funding to move forward. Public engagement was completed in December of 2021. The feedback that Niagara Parks led that engagement, there was a webinar and question and answer period, as well as a survey after that webinar. The feedback that they received was very positive and really exciting that the public was supportive of this project. And as such, the Niagara Parks Commission shortly thereafter also approved this project moving forward on their property. Funding applications have been ongoing since June of 2021. We've been trying to secure funding to be able to move forward, and we have been quite successful. The design update has been completed. We had to make sure that the design was updated to avoid any of the archaeological areas and just make sure that it's still within the scope of what we wanted to get done since things had changed in 2017. Site preparation, skipped one. We're currently in the process of procuring contractors, and that's being done through our restoration team at the NPCA. Site preparation is happening in June, and Niagara Parks will be leading that component. Wetland excavation to begin in July. The burns, habitat structures, and trails will be completed between August and September. And the plantings will happen in the fall when the weather's cooler and the chance of those plants surviving will be better. And we'll be able to engage the public in those plantings as well. That will happen September to October, with educational signage and project signage in 2023. Just in conclusion, I wanted to remind you that this is such a unique opportunity for creating a large-scale nearshore wetland habitat within the context of a multi-stakeholder partnership along the Great Lakes Connecting Channel. There are no other similar projects of this scale and geographic location within the Niagara Peninsula watershed. And completion of this project is critical for the Niagara River RAP and brings the Niagara River one step closer to delisting. That is all for today. Thank you so much for your time, and I'd be happy to answer your questions. And hopefully Corey will join me any minute now.
Thank you, Natalie. Terrific presentation, and what a great project. And the partnerships that have come into play is exceptional. Just to let you know, the CAO and myself are planning on meeting with the NPC CAO and chair over the course of the next few weeks. So when we do, this will be an interesting topic of discussion, this partnership that's going into play. So any questions to the presentation? And I have Member Woodhouse.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Important legacy projects indeed, and congratulations. These are the kind of things that put us in good light with the public and look to the future, so congratulations. My question is, it relates to the up to $45,000 cash toward the project. The two funding applications that you mentioned in your report, if those materialize, and how much would that be if they both materialized?
Through you, Chair, I'm not sure which member asked, but to the member that asked that question. We have applied for both of those $25,000, and we're not sure what they will provide us. When we put in applications, we make an ask, and sometimes they come in a little bit lower. But we could be, if we are successful with both, we could be looking at $0 cash and only our in-kind contribution.
Okay, so, and I apologize, it's a little hard in here because there's a bit of an echo, but the money, if it materializes, is that plus the 45 or is that minus the 45?
Minus. So that will bring our costs, okay. Through you, Chair, to the board, that will bring our costs down.
Okay,
that is
that's good. Thank you. Thank you. Appreciate that. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Member Woodhouse. Member Rapley.
I just want to congratulate this group on continuing the great work that goes on along the river. I've been on the Remedial Action Committee as a citizen member for, I think, 6 or 7 years, and I think the work that has happened there is super, and the partnership is super. Keep going. This is wonderful stuff. 100% support from me on this.
Thank you, Member Rapley. Member Hewson.
Thank you, Chair, through you to the presenter. Very exciting project. I think I brought this up at the last meeting when we reviewed our restoration budget, right? Yes. Okay. So I was even excited about it a month ago. So happy to see the details. I'm just wondering, is there opportunities for volunteers to help pitch in and do some of the work? I myself like to go out to our tree plantings. I'd love to come and see the site and see the work that's being done, actually, not just in a picture, but actually hands-on, see what's going on.
Yes, through Chair to Member Hewson. Yes, there will be opportunities. We are planning for community planting events in the fall, and this is how we've gotten some community support from the local nature clubs as well, is that they are also keen to come help plant the site in the fall. So yes.
Oh, okay, so there will be a tree planting opportunity here as well.
Yes.
Okay, so I also want to point out, something that I recognize, this, might be a bit of a side issue, but it's related. When I was helping with some of our tree planted, I noticed that there are corporations who are coming to those events and they're organizing employee groups to come. And I just want to be mindful of, if organizations are tapping into some of the work that we're doing because they support it, they might also be great organizations to support the NPCA or the NPCF in other ways, hint, hint. So it'd be good to keep track of who they are and build some relationships with those organizations. So with respect to this project, I'm wondering too, are we engaging with students or our educational institutions to help, build that knowledge base of for students who are studying earth sciences or ecological sciences, because it's great to have build local networks of knowledge who then long term could actually become potential employees for the organization.
Through you, Chair, to Member Hewson. Corey, would you like to take that question? Because Niagara Parks has been working on this for quite some time, and I know you have some partnerships with students. If you want to take that one.
Yes, thank you. So yes, we do have a standing partnership with Brock University and Niagara College. So they are definitely involved in the project and will continue to be, especially for the monitoring aspects. We're also reaching out to local secondary schools, and the Niagara Community College is there as well. So we're looking forward to keeping them involved as well.
Mm-hmm. And I did see a lot of high school students participating in some of our tree planting. I will tell you specifically, Ridley came out twice. So there's a lot of interest there. Just really happy to see the project. I'd love to come see the work that's being done. I don't know if there's an opportunity to perhaps have the board come check it out and kind of explain some of the things that have been done. But I think I think it's a great project. Thank you for bringing it forward.
Thank you, Member Hewson, and just thinking that through on partnerships, etc. And being as I am a Rotarian, the Rotary clubs in Niagara have very much taken on an environmental bent these days. So that could be an organization that we may want to reach out to in the future as well. Natalie, you can touch base with me. I can get some contacts for you with that. Let us move to Member Cridland.
Thank you, through you, Chair. Again, just echoing the praise that we all have for this project, and I'd like to also amplify just the collaborative skills that we have in NPCA. So it's something we can certainly all be proud of, in addition to obviously the technical skills. My question is just about documentation or documentary. Is there a
We've
plan
lost you,
for?
Donna.
I'm sorry.
Just hold on a second. We're having a minor technical glitch here. You know, when the technical guy comes running across the room, you know there's a minor technical glitch.
Testing.
She should be good. Okay, go ahead, Donna.
Okay, testing. So I did you get the amplifying the collaborative skills of the team? All right. So then the question is documentation or documentary or like capturing this for the future. You did mention this, the scale of it, uniqueness of it. Can you maybe just comment on whether there's plans for capturing all this? Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Through you, Chair, to Member Cridland. Corey and I have talked about doing some documentation, and we do with the RAP anyways. Is something that I'm keen on, is tracking the metrics and what we're going to be planting, doing some photo monitoring on site, so that's going to be included so we can show the progress over time. And then Corey and his communication staff have talked about doing some before and after video. I think we talked a little bit about that, but it's all in its infancy right now. But I can tell you that we will be recording and keeping data and collecting information as we go, because this is really exciting, as you mentioned, and we want to be able to report on it and share all the exciting news as we move forward and into the future.
Okay.
Corey, do you want to add to what I said as well? Sorry.
Yeah.
Collaborate.
No, I think you got everything. I think we did, like, we be citizen science involved, so I think there'll be ongoing opportunities to promote this project.
Great, thank you very much. Any other questions or to the presentation? I do not see anyone else. With that, Natalie, Corey, thank you very much for the presentation this morning. Now let's move back to A, which is the European Water Chestnut Rapid Response Program by Karen Alexander. Have we got Karen figured out now? Karen, are you there?
I hope you can hear me, because I can hear you now.
Yep, we can hear you just fine, Karen.
Okay, great. I will share my screen and get going here.
I can see you now too.
Awesome. Sorry about the technical difficulties. I don't know what happened there. My speakers just didn't want to come to life. Okay, so hopefully you can now see my screen.
Yes, it is there now.
Great. There we go. Okay, so thanks again for having me to present today, here to talk about the European water chestnut in the Welland River. I'm here with my colleague, Colin Casson, manager of policy at ISC. I don't know if you've seen him or heard from him yet, but he's joining me this morning. So today we'd like to just introduce the Invasive Species Center, talk about our European Water Chestnut Rapid Response Program, and leave some time for discussion and questions. First, I'd like to acknowledge the Invasive Species Center. The building is in Sault Ste. Marie, Ontario, which is the traditional territory of the Anishinaabe peoples in the Robinson-Huron Treaty area. We have employees kind of sitting around the province, and we like to acknowledge that we do recognize the long history of Indigenous and Métis people in this area and across Canada, and want to show respect to them and demonstrate gratitude for their ongoing care of the land and water. The Invasive Species Center, or ISC, is a not-for-profit organization, and our work involves connecting stakeholders' knowledge and technology And our real motivation and aim is to prevent the introduction and spread of invasive species that have the potential to cause significant harm to Canada's environment, economy, and society. And one of these species is European water chestnut. This one's quite concerning. It is native to Europe, Asia, and Africa. It likes slow-moving lakes, rivers, streams, and ponds where there's good soft substrate, full sun, and nutrient-rich waters. It'll live in shallow to deep water, often abundant in waters about 2 meters deep, but can be found living in waters up to 4 meters deep. And it produces these seeds that are in the center of the screen. It's an annual plant. It forms these rosettes and drops these seeds and forms stems from the seed that's sitting on the substrate all the way up the water column to create this floating rosette. And then in the water column, it's sending out roots. The result is a very thick biomass, dense biomass in the river. This can be very bad for ecology because it's an annual plant. It decomposes reduces oxygen levels and impacts fish populations. We also see drastic loss in native vegetation and not great for species at risk, which we know are in the river. This one is particularly harmful to recreation. The seeds there are very sharp and they end up coating the substrate, which can be very difficult to walk in, painful to step on, sometimes even causing cuts. And this will inhibit recreational use on shorelines, boating and swimming. And then there's often decreased property value and commercial fishing impacts. The Ontario Invasive Species Act sets out rules to prevent and control the spread of invasive species in Ontario. Species are regulated based on biological characteristics, risk of harm to the natural environment, and ability to disperse and cause social and economic impacts. European water chestnut is one of 22 prohibited species in Ontario. This means it's illegal to import, possess, release, transport, breed, grow, sell, lease, or trade in Ontario. There's also included anyone boating in infested waters must avoid spreading the plant, remove plant material from equipment before traveling over land, and dispose the plants so they do not end up back in the water. This plant was introduced in 1879 by a gardener at the Cambridge Botanical Garden in Massachusetts. He put it in several ponds and it has since spread through northeastern states and US states and into Quebec and is just arriving in Ontario. There have been millions of dollars spent in the New England area of the US to fight back against this species. In Ontario, the NDMNRF is fighting hard to curb its spread, along with partners like Ducks Unlimited, who's working hard to reduce the infestation in Wolfe Island in the Kingston area. And Ontario Parks is actually gaining on the battle in Voyageur Provincial Park after investing significant resources in control and management. Their investment has been driven by how bad it is for waterfront recreation. In the Welland River, we became aware of European water chestnut through the EDMAPS program, which is an early detection and rapid response mapping system. An off-duty DFO biologist submitted 3 observations in the river in August 2020. And it's the 3 between Welland Port and Beckett, the one just after Beckett's Bridge here in the middle of the screen. Another report came in later from another individual further downstream, closer to the Niagara Skydive Center. So these reports were actually easily confirmed because they had substantial information and great quality photos. But still, the ISC and Ducks Unlimited went out in July 2021 and paddled the river because we knew we needed a good understanding of the full extent of the infestation to lead to next steps on how to control the plant. So this led to, we surveyed 33 kilometers between the blue dots, the start there on the left and the end on the right, and found the worst of the infestation along 26 kilometers where about the yellow dots start and down to the end. The green line in the middle shows you where the worst of the infestation is. And all the yellow dots were what we call floater plants, because this species establishes these big mats, and the rosettes often break off if somebody disturbs them by a boat or paddling, or wildlife, or even a storm can send these rosettes floating downriver, and then they reestablish new populations. So we actually removed all the yellow dots last year, condensing or containing, we hope, the infestation into that green line area. And I think this audience might be interested to know that yellow dot was one flowering rush plant, which is another invasive plant that we took note of that day. We also put up signs. The the light blue eyes, if you can see them, are places where we put in educational signs. This is what they look like. Thank you very much for receiving 2 of these signs, one at Chippewa Creek and one at E.C. Brown Boat Launch. And this is our first attempt at early public education and awareness to let people know that this plant is in the river. So once we knew where the plant was and how to, or that it's contained in this section of the river, we went looking up control methods. We learned a lot from Voyageur Provincial Park. They have been at this for a number of years and have it reported great efficacy after 4 years of control. This is an annual plant, so the control is focused on not letting the plant produce seed every year. And by doing that, you have the opportunity to reduce seed viability. And they measured by actually collecting seeds, the density of seed and the viability of seed was reduced by 95% in 4 years. So that's great news. It means we can actually catch this plant. And the other things they learned have been kind of forming some of the best management practices for EWC in Ontario. And it includes this division of how to go after the plant depending on how dense and large the infestation is. So anything less than 100 meters squared is a good approach to hand pull, or use rakes, wading from boats, and what you're doing is pulling the plant out of the water and disposing it on land before the seeds form each year. The other opportunity, or the other sometimes control methods that are available, is to go after these very large stands greater than 100 meters or more by using heavy equipment. And a herbicide is actually a tool that is permitted to control this plant as well. Either of these control methods require repeat control for up to about 10 years. We do believe we'll see a significant reduction. So between 4 to 10 years, it'll kind of transition into a long-term monitoring and maintenance type of a project. And we do think that the majority of the EWC, or we know the majority in your river is less than 100 meters squared. So we do think, let's give the hand pulling a try. And with all of that knowledge, we created what we're proposing as the Rapid Response Program. And this is 3 kind of buckets of work that we are putting together with your support. The Welland River Collaborative, which brings together all the partners on the project. We've been working with staff at NPCA. We've engaged the town of Pelham and the town of West Lincoln, and looking to reach out to Wainfleet soon. We have the interest of the Peninsula Paddlers Club, and Burt Miller Nature Club is interested if their volunteers are willing and available. And Niagara College has put their hand up to assist as well. And we do believe that as we go through the years, we'll gain more interest from other clubs and local community groups. We're pitching a field program this year that's going to have 4 ISC hires. We have the posting up actually, and the applications are due May 27th. We're hoping to have the team hired and fully trained and ready to go the first week of July on the river. And they'll be starting the manual control work using canoe and a small aluminum boat with a motor. They'll be doing manual control, and their home base is at Chippewa Creek Conservation Area. And we did look at the potential for heavy equipment, which is not likely going to be in the program this year, but it's in the back of our minds as a potential need to see how things go this year first. And then there's a significant community engagement piece. We'd like to teach the peninsula paddlers and any other volunteers, I'm calling them river watchers, because what our hope is that once they know what European water chestnut looks like, they'll be on the lookout for it in other tributaries in the Niagara region as they're recreating in the waterways all summer. And we're also going to do a riverfront landowner mail out with support from the low tier municipalities. And this is to just kind of get ahead of the questions and let people know what's going on in the river, so they either become interested and engaged or avoid making phone calls and asking so many questions about why people are in the river pulling out plants. So that is what we're kind of going with this year. We do recognize this is a long-term control and monitoring commitment. We do intend to stay invested over the years, and we do hope that by teaching the river watchers what the plant looks like, we gain confidence that we are really getting EWC removed from the Niagara region. And we're looking at long-term options. If we can keep hiring OFA hit squad students each year, that's ideal. And over time, the job in the Welland River gets less taxing on their 8 to 16 weeks, and we can start talking about other invasives that we may be able to go after collaboratively. And Niagara College is quite interested in doing something, but they are limited to their September month because they don't have programming in the summer. So we're looking at maybe a follow-up cleanup event in September. So that brings us to how ISC and NPCA have been working together already. I did send in or Carrie and I have been working on a memorandum of understanding that describes our partnership. I believe it was shared out with the board, but it kind of identifies these areas of cooperation. So we're working together to hire and train the OFA hit squad hires. We're working together to participate in the Welland River Collaborative, co-hosting river watcher paddling tours, the biomass disposal plan, and equipment storage and facility use. And we're looking at joint community outreach and engagement activities. What that specifically looks like for NPCA is we're asking for your support, site-specific training for the hit squad team. Because they're home based at Chippewa Creek, we're looking to have a property tour and a property tour at EC Brown to help them understand, property rules, where to put equipment, excuse me. And just to help them get familiar with the properties themselves. The equipment storage piece, we've decided to use an equipment area at Chippewa Creek. And then having monthly meetings with our team and the Welland River Collaborative as needed, community outreach and engagement activities where we're talking about a media event at some point, and perhaps a tour for councils and maybe the board to come out and take a look at the river and the infestation. And then the biomass disposal sites right on your properties, far enough away from the river that they don't have a chance of getting back into the water. And I can let you know that once this plant is removed from the river, it does decompose really quickly. So we're not going to be seeing, decaying vegetation for years to come. It does degrade relatively quickly. And then, of course, we are going to keep looking for funding. I guess I missed to tell you that this year's program is funded by the NDMNRF and an emergency response fund that they have. But we did apply to the DFO Habitat Stewardship Grant for Species at Risk and the MECP's Great Lakes Community Action Fund. We haven't heard from either of them yet. So fingers crossed still, but not looking great this year, but we will keep looking for funding in the coming years and looking for your support as we do that. Oops. And this I brought in because it's a neat pictures of that heavy equipment idea that we're not going to be able to do this year, but maybe in the future we bring in heavy equipment. The trucks are there on the bottom left. and the barge that goes with it could be quite effective at larger populations. The truck sort of cuts the vegetation out of the water and plops it on the barge. The contribution from the community that's needed for this to work is onshore heavy equipment, a bobcat or an excavator that lifts the net off the barge and moves the vegetation. That's the challenge to getting this type of thing set up. But it's a neat pictures to show you what that could look like, and it is working for Phragmites up in the Lake Huron shore and some communities in the north. So I'll stop there and take some questions, or if anyone wants to see any slides, again, happy to go backwards. And thanks again for having us present, and we really look forward to working with you on this really important project.
Great. Thank you very much, Karen. Great presentation. Any questions from anybody? Let us start with Member McKenzie.
Thank you, Chair Foster, and through you to Karen. First of all, my compliments for bringing this story to us and for the creativity and endurance that you've shown in your project here and in other places. This new invasive species, very concerning to me, myself, and to the greater community. And I believe this parallels concerns, and you mentioned Phragmites and the type of work that's being done up in Oliphant and other places, Long Point, not far away from our own jurisdiction. Chair Foster, I'd like to ask a question of the NPCA staff, or maybe it's a suggestion. First of all, is the NPCA involved with the removal or control of Phragmites in the Niagara watershed, other than at the Grimsby wetlands in Grimsby? Are there other control projects for Phragmites on the books?
Jeff, I believe you're online.
Yeah, through you, Chair. Other than the bigger lagoons, presently not at the moment. However, we have had several inquiries from municipalities seeking our support with what to do with Phragmites in their jurisdictions. And we are also looking currently at invasive species a little bit more broadly through our restoration enhanced services feasibility study. So it's a noted gap, and we're getting inquiries, and we're responding by doing a little bit of homework right now to figure out what is required in Niagara to address it.
Member McKenzie?
Yes. Thank you, Jeff. I wish you the best of success for this. Phragmites has been with us too long, and I hope that Niagara, through the assistance of the NPCA, can take a strong direction. And there's some useful tools with Phragmites and another invasive wild parsnip in Niagara. And you mentioned municipalities that they could declare these plants noxious weeds under the Weed Act, if I understand the act properly. And then the municipality can use that in communicating with private and public landowners. So I hope that when it comes to budgets, my main concern is that in the individual municipalities, they have a long learning curve, and the region or the NPCA has this opportunity to coordinate all these learning curves. And the responsibility of looking after the water and our lands in Niagara often falls onto the NPCA. And this is something that I hope our regional representatives can take back to the region and strongly encourage support of invasive species programs in Niagara and coordinating them through the NPCA and the Invasive Species Center it to me makes a tremendous amount of sense. And then you can have a coordinated program across Ontario, across Niagara. So I thank you for the time, Chair, and I look forward to receiving further information from staff and Invasive Species Center as we move along. Thank you.
Thank you, Member McKenzie. I gave you a little bit of latitude because a portion of that should really be discussed at the report stage. But so just for the rest that have their hands up at the moment, I have Member Woodhouse, then Member Halinga, then Member Hewson. These are questions to the presenter at this point. Please go ahead, Member Woodhouse.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Is this program a program of control, or is it a program of eradicating this plant?
Great question. The goal is to eradicate. With invasive species, it can always be a little challenging. So sometimes you have to set your goal to contain the spread, and then identify any other potential rivers that have been impacted, which is where the river watchers come in. So yeah, we do hope to eradicate it from the Niagara region. We do have to verify that we have caught all of it and then make sure we're containing it if we can't remove it all every year, and then just return and try again to get the whole population.
So maybe just for my benefit, has there ever been an invasive species that we have been able to eradicate?
In local areas, yeah, we do gain on many of them. I'll bring up Phragmites again because that's the one I'm most familiar with. There are great success stories coming in across the province for people who are getting ahead of that one and successfully controlling it. And it does take those collaborative efforts, some strategic thinking, education, awareness, community engagement. It really requires a lot of broad level thinking, not just controlling.
So it's going to take a full court press basically to first educate the public about this, because this is the first time I've heard of this, to be honest with you. I've heard of a lot of the others, but this is the first time I've heard of this one specifically. But in my mind, I can actually see those little nuts on the water shoreline someplace, and I couldn't remember where it was as you were talking.
Oh no.
So anyway, because of this is going to be a long-term project, and hopefully the objective is achieved, that is eradicating it totally. There's still going to need to be, because it invaded here once, so it's going to invade again. I mean, once it's eradicated here, we know that. So is there, the initiative is to educate the public so that they become the watchdogs in the event that 10 years from now, hopefully it's gone, that when it does reappear, we have people telling us that it is?
Absolutely. That's a big part of the response here, is to build that community awareness and teach more and more people about the EDMAPS platform, because it does work. The reports go in and they are responded to. So if we can, build a trained force of people that are paddling the rivers, let's say, and that's why the Peninsula Paddlers was a great fit for this. They are the recreational paddlists that seem to want to know how to help. So we'll start there, and maybe we go broader with help from NPCA and your networks and connections. I think we can bring in more groups. I think Carrie mentioned the Scouts Canada already expressed interest. So I do think as we build this program, we're going to see more community engagement opportunities. And eventually, yes, the idea is let's not let this establish, because you're right, it's going to keep potentially arriving.
And I thank you for that, and I wish you well. And to me, this is, I read your report, very interesting. I found it. It's very helpful and educational for me, and as a board member, this is something I think we should be spreading across our educational system so that the public are aware of this, that this is existing, and then there's issues or actions that they can take to be part of the solution. Thank you very much for your answers.
Thank you for your question.
Yep, thank you, Member Woodhouse. I have Member Halinga and then Member Hewson. Go ahead, Jack.
Thank you, Chair, and through you to Karen. Thank you, Karen, for the informative presentation. I picked up on that you have had some success with herbicides, and I guess I'm asking, is this a selective herbicide? Because I've seen what glyphosate does to Phragmites and the rest of the vegetation around it. So how do we keep it out of the water and keep the water safe and still eliminate the European chestnut?
Yeah, thank you for that question. The herbicide that's approved to treat European water chestnut is called Reward, and it's an aquatic herbicide. I don't know everything about it. I do think it's a targeted selective, like you would select, very carefully apply to target the plant itself. There may be other plants impacted. We're not we're not going to plan to use herbicide just yet for this population. So if we did go down that road, it would be done very carefully with licensed pesticide applicators and permission to do so from the authorities that run the Pesticide Act in Ontario, the MECP and the NDMRF. So I think, yeah, it's a tool in the toolbox. I don't think we want to use it just yet. We're gonna try the manual control that has been working in other places and reevaluate. See if we need to bring in that harmful tool. It's not harmful. It's a tool that can be useful with some potential negative impact.
Member Alinga?
Yes, thank you for that. Yeah, I can see the application of it as a follow-up to the removal because it would be quite effective on very small areas, whereas I can't see it being economical in the first place on large formations. So yeah, I think that assessing after the removal will dictate how we use the herbicides. And thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yep. Thank you, Member Halinga. Member Hewson.
I thank you, Chair, through you to the presenter. Karen, I think you said that some boating can help spread this. Is that correct? So in the pictures that you showed, it looked like a fairly mature plant, and the seed didn't really look like something that could attach to a boat. I'm just wondering how does that spread? Like, could it spread on a kayak?
Maybe not so much a kayak. What happens is if somebody is unaware of European water chestnut in the river, they might go paddling through it. And if they paddle through it, they're loosening up the plants, breaking some of the rosettes off, and then sending the rosettes to a new location, which would contribute to the spread. A motorboat could very well get some of the biomass stuck up in propellers and not knowingly bring it somewhere else. So there's a few ways that boating can exacerbate the problem.
So is there, your map looked like this species is actually spread through the river. Is it possible that it could actually spread into the Niagara River, or is that waterway a little more too active? Because you said it prefers more of a quieter waterway.
I think the speed of the Niagara River would certainly deter it. There could be some quieter spots along the edges that it finds and settles into. The real threat is if it gets into the Niagara River and continues and lands on Lake Ontario and gets down into some of the wetlands in that lake. So I think it could be a really concerning corridor and spread vector for sure.
But we also have a lot of smaller waterways that branch off of the Niagara River. Have we monitored to make sure that it hasn't started its way in, or is that something to be determined?
That is something to be determined, and we're going to try the River Watchers program and teach the paddlers what this looks like, and start there. And as our team has potentially some free time, we'll see how things go. We may do that. We may send them paddling down a nearby tributary to check. We also have potential opportunity to bring in eDNA kits, which ISC is working on in other program areas, Eurasian milfoil to be one of them. And that's another opportunity to kind of check. It doesn't confirm that it's there or not, but it detects DNA, and then you can go and look. It kind of helps you direct those survey resources that might be limited to some tributaries that are nearby.
Okay.
We're kind of just discussing whether that's a fit or not. Yeah.
Yeah, I was quite alarmed to see this because the Welland River is right at the bottom of my municipality, and so it's something that's going to be of concern to my constituents. But thank you for your presentation. I learned a lot, and I'm really appreciative that you brought this forward for us.
Thank you.
Thank you, Member Hewson. Member Cridland, please go ahead.
Thank you, through you, Chair. Karen, could you comment just briefly on the composting, or what happens with these plants if they're pulled out, particularly maybe by the public? Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think they do decompose very quickly. And once they're out of the water, they die. They really need to be in the water. So it's an effective, once you remove that plant from the water, it's going to die very quickly and decompose. I can't tell you how long, but as long as the plant is placed far enough away from the river that it won't wash back in, then that's fair game. I think we want to avoid the public taking on too much of this, because then we won't necessarily know where the plants are ending up. Very carefully navigate that space and try to maybe run some organized events so that we're managing the biomass, or train some of maybe the local riverfront landowners that do have an interest and want to know what to do if they see a few plants. What do I do with them? Train them properly. So we're going to navigate that space very carefully, but it is yeah.
Thank you.
I don't think we want the public thinking, I'll just pull this plant and toss it, right? So.
Okay.
Thanks for the question.
Member Cridland, anything else?
No, thank you, Chair.
Great, thank you. I don't see any other, I'm sorry. I do see another person. Mr. Ingrao, please go ahead.
One short question. Are the local municipalities fully aware of the status of this?
We're working on that right now. I have presented to the town of West Lincoln, who came on board pretty early and to support some of our applications, and as a result requested a presentation to their planning committee, which I completed on May 9th. I did offer to present to the town of Pelham, and they haven't yet accepted that invitation, but their planning department fully supported our application. And I've just not been able to reach anyone at the town of Wainfleet yet to fully engage them. So I think Carrie and I are going to work on that and make sure everyone is aware of what's going on.
The city of Welland as well, you mentioned, Karen, because the city of Welland is.
Yeah, those are the big ones that are around the affected areas. Yeah, we could go bigger and talk generally about coordinating prevention programs, but yeah, we probably don't have the resources yet.
Go ahead, Mr.
Just a short answer. Is the city of Welland aware of the status of this?
Not yet.
Thank you.
Okay, looking around, I believe that's the end of the questions for you, Karen. Just a quick comment from the chair. I have a cottage up on Lake Huron in Point Clark, and we're very much involved with the Lake Huron Coastal Center up there and working towards the removal of invasive species and most of what we're doing is education, particularly for homeowners in and along the lake. So I look forward to opportunities for us between the NPCA and your organization to make sure that we have that information out there, so people who are living along these waterways, do have all the information they need to make sure these invasive species are being removed appropriately. So
I like to hear that.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you. Have a good rest of your meeting, everyone.
Yep, thank you, Karen.
Thank you.
So with the indulgence of committee at this point, or our board, I'd like to, as a block, receive our presentation that we just received concerning the invasive species, also the Gonders Flat presentation, and also our 2 consent items that go along with that, which are the 2 reports, Gonders Flat Wetland Environment Project and the European Water Chestnut Rapid Response Program. I know. Yeah, don't worry, I know where I'm going with this. So with that, can I get Member Metcalf to move that we do that? And Member Woodhouse, would you second that, please?
I so move.
So are there any questions to the 2 reports that go along with this? I believe, and Member McKenzie, you gave some very good information back in and through with your commentary to staff as well. So are there any questions at this point? And seeing none, is anyone opposed to us? Go ahead, Councillor Houston, or Member Houston.
Considering the feedback on wanting to make City of Welland and Wayne State were aware, would it be beneficial to circulate the report to those municipalities?
I'll ask the CAO concerning that.
Sorry, Member Houston, can you repeat your question?
I caught Chandra off guard. She's just wondering if we should be circulating these reports to the municipalities.
We can certainly do that.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. So is anyone opposed to us accepting these presentations and 2 consent reports? I see no one. So with that, and the reason that I changed the order, Mr. Clerk, is that now I think this next presentation and report kind of fit together reports. So with that, let's go to our 3rd presentation this morning. Leilani Lee Yates, our Director of Watershed Management, and the person that I reach out to probably, once every 2 days on issues. So Leilani, please go ahead with your presentation.
Good morning, Mr. Chair and board members. Thank you very much for having our team introduce these projects and give you an overview today. Making this presentation with me today is our internal working group. Sitting on this team, we have experts in planning, ecology, biology, with expertise from conservation authorities, municipalities, as well as consultant firms. And we even have a few members who've been with the NPCA for over a decade each, who bring invaluable experience and knowledge of the NPC in our watershed. So I'd just like to take the opportunity to introduce our working group members. First, we have David Duluth. He's our Senior Manager of Environmental Policy and Planning. He's also our lead for the Policy Review and Procedural Manual project. Next, we have Teresa Bukovics and Adam Aldworth, who are planning ecologists. And they're really our boots on the ground. They're in the field. They're, learning about our watershed and are very knowledgeable about it, meeting with consultants in the field and applicants and municipal partners. Unable to join us today is Amy Parks. She's our manager of planning ecology for Adam and Teresa. We also have Sarah Mastrioni, who's manager of planning and permits. And together, this team's done a tremendous amount of work pulling these two documents together. And together, we'll be doing this presentation with you today. So we'll just recap the Phase 2 policy review timeline. We'll give an overview of where we're at currently in our work. And the two documents before you today for consideration, the draft interim EIS guideline for Section 28 implementation and our interim wetlands procedure document. We'll provide an overview of those two documents. We'll talk about next steps, and we'll be available to answer any questions you may have. So back in March, the board approved our work plan for Phase 2, and we've kicked off that work. We did put out an RFP to retain a consultant team to help us with this ambitious project and timeline, but unfortunately we did not get any submissions. And in trying to understand why that may be, we do know from speaking with consultants that they are quite busy right now, particularly with municipal official plan reviews and other municipal projects. And also the timeline that we presented perhaps may have been a bit too ambitious for maybe some people to take on at this time. However, we are moving forward and we're taking a hybrid approach. Staff are undertaking some of this work in-house, and we're also reaching out to consultants who have expertise with conservation authorities and the technical review we're looking for to assist us. So we will be pulling in staff as needed across the organization, as well as looking for some consultant help. But we are on track to deliver our first two deliverables of this work plan, which is the interim Section 28 ES guideline and wetland procedure document. Our staff have put a tremendous amount of work pulling these two documents together over the last month and a bit. We have looked at other jurisdictions. We have looked internally at our own processes. We brought it forward to the governance committee on May 12th to get their input and constructive feedback that we've incorporated into these documents that are before you today. So I would like to introduce David Deleuze to walk you through some of the additional work that we've done.
Thank you, Leilani. So the NPCA staff are recommending that the developing the
Sorry, David, you've cut out a little bit. You've dropped out, I think, David.
Okay, sorry about that. We had a few minor technical glitches. David, please go ahead.
Okay, thank you, Chair Foster. Back in March, NPCA staff had recommended developing EIS guidelines and a wetland procedure document, and the board had approved those recommendations as part of our Phase 1 report. So currently, there are no guidelines or procedures on how to implement the NPCA's policies, and in particular, NPCA wetland policies. These documents will give staff the necessary tools to ensure that EISs are scoped appropriately and consistently. They also give applicants clarity of what is expected of them when undertaking an EIS. And together, these documents will better ensure that an EIS meets a high quality standard. The documents are interim and will be reviewed and updated as part of Phase 2 of the policy update project. There will be opportunities for stakeholder input during this process, and in particular, staff will be engaging the agricultural community as part of the Phase 2 update. The final documents will be incorporated into the procedural manual. Now, one areas of our policy that will greatly benefit from this guidance is the reconfiguration and compensation section in our policy. This section has been in our documents since the first version of the policies came out in December of 2007. The lack of a procedure has made implementing this policy challenging. The reconfiguration and compensation policies are only used in situations where a small adjustment to a wetland boundary is needed to allow for a functional site design. This has been the test that staff use when applying this policy. The most common situation where we have been using this policy in recent years is where unmapped wetlands have been identified during the review of a planning application. It is important to understand that this policy does not apply to provincially significant wetlands. It only applies to non-PSWs. And then also the reconfiguration policy will be reviewed as part of Phase 2 of the policy update. Next slide, please. So there are several NPCA policies that make reference to the requirement for an EIS for the purpose of properly demonstrating that there would be no negative impact on an NPCA feature. The purpose of the NPCA's EIS guidelines is to educate and provide clarity for the public and applicants about the NPCA's requirements for conducting an EIS. In developing the NPCA's EIS guidelines, we looked at what other CA and municipalities are doing for best management practices for EISs. The guideline provides direction and clarity around when an EIS is required, what circumstances an EIS might be waived, how to scope an EIS, and the environmental components that need to be studied in the EIS itself. Normal farm practices such as cropping and tilling of fields do not require NPCA permits, and where building permits are required for agricultural uses, including value-added or agriculturally related uses, NPCA staff work carefully with the applicant to see how EIS requirements can be scoped to narrow down the burden on to the applicant. This will help ensure that EISs are completed to an appropriate and consistent standard. The guideline reflects current practice and incorporates new best practices such as a scoping checklist and an EIS submission checklist. In many instances, an EIS is required by the NPCA, is also required by other agencies such as municipalities or the Niagara Escarpment Commission. The guidelines do provide the need to coordinate with other agencies when there is overlapping jurisdictions. So that way that an EIS submitted to the NPCA can also make sure that it addresses requirements for either municipalities or other agencies like the NEC. Next slide, please. The goal of the wetland procedure document is to educate the public and applicants about the NPCA wetland process and review process, The new document provides information about the importance of ecological and hydrological functions of a wetland. Those are sort of the critical cornerstones when we look at impacts to a wetland. The document provides clarity for the public, landowners, and applicants about what the NPCA's expectations are and study requirements are when development is proposed near a wetland. The document is based on research of best practices for assessing impacts to wetlands. The document is to be read in conjunction with the NPCA EIS guidelines and reflects current NPCA practice. And similar to the EIS guideline, the document speaks to the need to coordinate with other agencies where there is overlapping jurisdiction. Next slide, please. Now, as noted earlier, the NPCA's current policies, specifically Section 8228 of our policy document, provide the opportunity for reconfiguration or compensation for non-provincially significant wetlands. Again, it must be stressed that the use of this policy is only used as a last resort where a functional development design cannot be achieved on the site. A requirement of the policy is that an EIS be completed to examine the form and function of the wetland that is to be reconfigured and inform the needs of the wetland to be created. The NPCA generally seek a net gain when this policy is being used. Now, there are a number of requirements necessary to implement this policy, such as a reconfiguration or compensation plan, a monitoring plan, financial securities to guarantee that the work is done to the appropriate standard, and a legal agreement to implement the plans and specify the legal terms for monitoring and conditions where the securities may be used. Other studies or plans may also be required, such as a hydrology study or a hydrogeological study. Now, it needs to be stressed, providing the necessary information in an EIS does not guarantee that a permit application for wetland reconfiguration or compensation would be approved. There may be other policy reasons or issues with the EIS that would result in staff refusal of the permit. And at this point, I will pass it over to Teresa to take the next slide.
Hi, I'm Teresa. Thank you so much for being here. I'm just going to walk you through the environmental impact study process. Here's the environmental impact study process diagram. This is just an overview in its entirety, but I'll go into more detail and discuss each step by step. Next slide, please. In step one is the project screening stage. In this step, NPCA technical staff will assess the application based off of our regulations to see if there are any EIS triggers. If there are no environmental impact study triggers that are identified, then there's no EIS required. And for the applicant, there's no further action in this EIS process. However, if there are any EIS triggers that are identified, then we'll look whether there are exemptions. Again, if there are exemptions, then there's no EIS required. And for the applicant, there's no further action in the EIS process. But if there is an exemption, sometimes we look for opportunities where there could be modifications to the project to avoid EIS triggers. Again, if there are options where we can avoid an EIS trigger, then there's no EIS required. And again, no further action in the EIS process. But again, if these triggers can't be avoided, there's times where an EIS can be waived. And if an EIS is waived, the applicant still has to address conditions of the permit. Sometimes like mitigation plans or a landscape plan. Although the EIS wouldn't be required, there's still conditions of the permit that would need to be upheld. But if the EIS is required, then we move on to step two. Next slide, please. In step two, it's scoping of the environmental impact study. In this step, NPCA technical staff will review the application depending on the scope, nature, and location. Technical staff will create a scoping terms of reference checklist, which is Appendix D in your document. This checklist, which basically identifies the level of studies that are required. In this checklist, there'll be such as field surveys and studies. There'll be a feature-based water balance for wetlands, headwater drainage feature assessment for water courses. So this checklist then is submitted to the applicant, who prepares what we call a draft terms of reference. This will be more fulsome. It'll be basically how the work will be carried out, the methods the approach, the timing windows, and this information would then be submitted to NPCA technical staff to review. If NPCA technical staff reviews it and it's to the satisfaction of NPCA technical staff, it's approved, and we move on to step 3. If it's not approved and there's some deficiencies, NPCA technical staff will submit it back to the applicant with comments for their review and consideration, and it'll keep going through this iterative process until NPCA technical staff is satisfied. Once the terms of reference is approved, the terms of reference is then becomes a foundation for which the draft environmental impact study is constructed. And so this becomes now step 3. In the information gathering and draft EIS preparation stage, the applicant then prepares a draft environmental impact study. This is like this is a big report, and it's based off all the field surveys that are being conducted, the background information, and NPCA technical staff will be out with the applicant delineating key features. Once the work is carried out and features are delineated, the applicant then prepares a draft environmental impact study. Next slide, please. And then we move on to step 4, submission and review of the draft environmental impact study. In this step, the applicant then submits the draft environmental impact study and the EIS submission checklist. This is NPCA's checklist, and this could be found in Appendix G. This package is then submitted to NPCA technical staff to review, and then NPCA technical staff will review it for completeness. If there's deficiencies that are found, it's submitted back to the applicant with comments for review and consideration, and the applicant then submits it back to NPCA technical staff to review until NPCA's technical staff is satisfied. Sometimes we go through typically 3 rounds of submissions, and once NPCA technical staff is satisfied and the draft EIS is approved, we move on to step 5, the final EIS and data package submission stage. In this step, the applicant then prepares the data package, which includes the final EIS. It also includes species information and digital mapping, and this is all submitted again to NPCA technical staff to review. If there's deficiencies, it gets submitted back to the applicant for review and consideration until NPCA technical staff is satisfied. And once NPCA technical staff is satisfied, the EIS is complete. I just want to stress that this is very much a science-based decision approach, and we do take a lot of time to review and consideration to reviewing each project based off the scope, nature, and location. And thank you. I'll pass it off to Adam.
Good morning. I'm going to run through the different kinds of wetlands that are found in NPCA's jurisdiction. So within the NPCA's watershed, a substantial amount of wetlands have been evaluated by the MND-MNRF following the Ontario Wetland Evaluation Protocol, also known as OES, in comparison to other conservation authorities. Excuse me. The MND-MNRF undertook a comprehensive review of wetlands within the NPCA's watershed in 2009. Evaluated wetlands are those which have been evaluated following the Ontario Wetland Evaluation System. Evaluated wetlands may be provincially significant wetlands, also known as PSWs, which means that they have scored 600 points through the OES or 200 points in either the special features or biological components. If a wetland has been evaluated and does not meet the criteria to be provincially significant, it is considered a non-provincially significant wetland or locally significant wetland. Wetland evaluation files are living documents which are amended from time to time as new information is available. These files are administered by the MND-MNRF, and any changes to evaluated wetlands, such as boundary revisions, polygon additions, or deletions, are subject to review and approval by the MND-MNRF. Next slide, please. Unevaluated wetlands are wetlands which have not been evaluated following OES, however are present on the landscape. Unevaluated wetlands are identified through a number of screening tools, including our natural areas inventory, Land Information Ontario mapping, air photo interpretation, site visits, or site-specific study. Through MPCA's review process, unevaluated wetlands which have been identified may be required to be evaluated by a qualified professional. These evaluations are subject to review and approval by M&D MNRF staff. Prior to and following approval of the wetland evaluation, wetlands identified on the landscape are subject to the MPCA's policies and regulations. Should M&D MNRF not require an evaluation of the unevaluated wetlands, the MPCA will continue to require technical assessment of the feature to demonstrate conformance with MPCA policies and regulation. These may include an EIS or a water balance. Next slide, please. So to give you an idea of what this all looks like as we screen projects, on the left-hand side of the screen there, the red polygon has identified a provincially significant wetland. To the right of that green hatched area is an unevaluated wetland which has been identified through our natural areas inventory. And at the bottom of the screen, the gray polygon represents an unevaluated wetland which is being identified by the M&D MNRF. And with that, I'll pass it on to David Deleuze.
Thanks, Adam. So next steps, right now we are seeking the board's approval for these documents. Once approved, the interim documents will be made available on our website and circulated to our municipal partners. Staff will then direct applicants to the interim documents and provide assistance where requested. And the final documents will ultimately be part of the MPCA's new procedural manual. Next slide, please.
Thanks, team. And with that, we'd like to thank the board with the opportunity to provide this presentation today. And we're available for any questions you may have. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Director Yates. What I would like to do, with permission of committee, is I would like to accept the presentation and then dive right into the two reports. And the reason is that, and if you can just leave the presentation up, we can always go back to it and have staff talk to that specifically within that, if that's okay with you, Leilani. So with that, can I get Member Wright and Member Shurton to accept the presentation? Is anyone opposed to that? Thank you. So let's put the first report onto the table, which is report number FA 2022, NPCA Draft Interim Section 28 Environmental Impact Study Guideline. And can I get Member Halinga to move that and Member Rapley to second that? Thank you. So, Member Halinga, you had your hand up. I'm hoping that I haven't screwed up your thinking process too much here. Do you have a question on this report?
There actually are points that I would like emphasized, which were well emphasized already, but I think it's important that the entire board emphasize it, and that is that when we talk about compensation and offset, that it be recognized that this is only LSWs after all other resources are exhausted. And I think that's really important. This doesn't apply to PSWs and those that are already under the OWES methodology of ratings. A question that arises is in the charts, slide 7, slide 10. They showed the process. Well, okay, that slide 7 was related to the LSW only application, but slide 10, when we got the explanation for that, it's an iterative process. It's circular, and it keeps going around and around until everybody is satisfied with the completeness of the document. But we passed or received 4 documents from Conservation Ontario this morning. And the emphasis of those is that the Conservation Authority is responding to the provincial regulations or proposals related to better access to homes and the shortcuts that could be taken, and the fact that there will be a 60-day turnaround on applications, and if not processed in that time, the fees could be discontinued or written off. And how does our circular process apply if we have to address everything within the 60-day time frame? So I think that I'm expressing some concern as to how our EIS circular process is going to be affected with potential provincial legislation.
Through you, Mr. Chair. The real purpose of having this document and this guidance is so that we can create the certainty and the understanding of what's required and look at the process more at the front end. So through the correspondence from Conservation Ontario, one of the points that was trying to hit home was the importance of really comprehensive pre-consultation in the process and knowing what's required for the studies before the studies are completed. And what this process identifies is, from our end, identifying what the requirements are through scoping and setting that checklist and establishing a terms of reference that we sign off on from our end so that there's assurance and certainty that when the report is submitted, it should be submitted and be complete and comprehensive to our requirements, rather than in the past, in my experience, when we don't have this type of guidance, there's a lot of iterative back and forth. And I can say it is a time waster to keep going back and forth and fighting over what should be in the terms of reference and what shouldn't. So what we're trying to establish here is setting our expectations for the applicant and working with our municipal partners to understand how they will implement the changes through Bill 109 and their processes and how we will fit into that. And we've already started those discussions at a staff level and engaging municipalities to talk about how we fit into that process, that truncated process.
Member Linga?
Yes, thank you. And I believe in the Conservation Ontario correspondence, they also said that the local conservation authorities can and are expected to submit comments to the ERO postings, and this is one area where I think that it should be emphasized that the 60-day period should start after a complete and acceptable application has been submitted. Just my recommendation.
Thank you, Member Linga. Member Rapley.
On the very positive side, to start with, I want to make a comment that this is fantastic work that you're doing, and pulling this together, it is really heading in a good direction for the role of the Conservation Authority. Very thorough, well written, and very impressive. I can only say that back in what I call the dark era of the NPCA, it would have been great to have this type of program in place and active. So we have to move on with the future, and with Chandra here and staff like you and the others that are involved. This is very encouraging. One of the problems just raised by Jack involving timing is we've had some major projects here in Niagara that slipped through in the past that there should be real proper studies, and the studies need to take in a cycle. For instance, if you have a 60-day period and it's in the middle of the winter, you will never get your proper bird, amphibian, and other studies completed. So obviously that has to be part of the process. Secondly, we're relying on people doing studies under the suggestion and direction of NPCA that are hired by the people that are the developers. And what has surprised me in some of the recent things like Waverly Woods is that no biologist from the Ministry of Natural Resources or ecologist from the NPCA actually went to the site that was involved. So you're relying entirely on that end of it. And you did mention some site visits in here, and I think getting a great report, with all the boxes ticked off and everything is okay. But I really think the site visit by NPCA ecologists is extremely important, because you have to confirm, recently there's been a huge debate about wetlands, whether they're important wetlands or not, and having, expertise from the NPCA make a site visit, I think would be a darn good thing to do. So these things need to be done properly. Recently, migratory birds has become really important, and there are criteria for those type of things to qualify that are well established and out there, and it goes beyond what's on the site at a particular one-day visit, or what is the nesting situation. The migratory bird situation could be extremely important as well, and we have to make sure that's included in our guidelines. So you're doing great work. I'm really pleased to see this, because I think if we can get programs like these really established in the future, there'll be a proper program, and congratulate you on your work.
Thank you very much, Member Rapley. We do have report FA 2022 on the floor. Are there any questions or comments to this particular report? Member Halinga, please go ahead.
I am just thrilled to see this document. I support it 100%. And I think that a lot of us on the board are here because of our real commitment to protecting the wetlands. And although this is called an interim policy, I believe that the intent is that it will be used until the final policy document is updated, or procedure manual is completely updated. But I'm very thrilled to see it, and I'd be very pleased to make the motion to adopt it.
Yep. Already ahead of you there, Jack. We got you and Member Rapley as the mover and seconder. Leilani, any comments on that?
Yes, through you, Mr. Chair. Although the documents are noted as interim, the intention is we will continue through our process on our final procedural manual, and there will be opportunities to get some additional input through the engagement process. But the intention is we start implementing them today, the minute that they're approved by this board, and we'll continue to implement them through to the final procedure document and beyond once they're part of the procedural document.
Thank you, Director. Is there anyone opposed to us approving report FA 2022? I do not see anybody opposing. Thank you very much. Concerning report FA 2122, I'd like Member Halinga to move that and Member Beattie to second that, please. Are there any questions or any comments to the report? Member Kaywall, I believe you have your hand up. Please go ahead.
Yes, thank you, Chair. So about a week ago, both of these reports were brought to the Governance Committee, seeking input of the Governance Committee. And my recollection of that discussion was that the members of the committee provided a number of inputs, which I think the management team indicated would be considered. My question is, have those inputs been reflected in the documents we're seeing today?
Through you, Mr. Chair, to Member Kaywall, yes, we have. We've made all the changes to the documents with the input that we received on the edits that were noted, as well as comments around use of language. We've made all those changes, and we've also done one last comb through for copy edits. And hopefully this, what stands before you today is in good shape to move forward and start using on our day-to-day basis. Thank you.
That's terrific. Thank you very much for doing that. My second question, and I raised this at the committee, but I want to raise it again, has to do with where there's jurisdictional conflict of policies. And to be very specific, in report 2122 on the interim wetland policies, the NPCA policy allows for offsetting, and at the Niagara Region official plan level, it does not. So is my assumption correct that when there's a jurisdictional conflict, that you typically go to the higher standard, which in this case would be the Niagara Region standard?
Through you, Mr. Chair, when there are applications that are both Planning Act applications that would then end up requiring a permit under our regulation, we work with the municipality to identify the technical needs under their policy construct. So the provincial plans, the regional official plan, the municipal official plan. And in the case with the region, we do know that with their new policies, they've identified no compensation. So we would work with the municipality to uphold those policies with them. Again, as we noted, these are wetlands that are not PSW or unevaluated or locally. There's rigor in terms of how we would approach identifying the need to move forward with considering compensation. So I would say our process to date and in moving forward would be to work with our municipal partners where they have more restrictive policies and identify those technical needs with them.
Okay, I will interpret that as a yes. Okay, thank you very much. That was a very detailed answer. Those were my questions, Chair. So.
Great, thank you very much, Member Kaywall. I do not see any other hands up at this point. So with that, is there anyone opposed to us accepting report and approving FA 2122? Seeing none, thank you very much. Let us move on to committee reports. We have the minutes of the Governance Committee meeting dated May the 12th, 2022. And as noted by Member Kaywall, these two policies that or the two guidelines that are coming into place were discussed very thoroughly at the Governance Committee. And in fact, I think that process is going to work well as we work our way through other policies over the course of the next little while. So, Member Ingrao, anything you want to highlight from the meeting, or?
Through you, Chair Foster. No, I'm very pleased with the movement we've had and the steps that we've taken. Very, very content with it.
Great, thank you. And by the way, it was a quasi-hybrid meeting that we had with that. So Member Ingrao and Grant were at HQ in Welland, and the rest of us were online. So thank you very much for that. So I'm going to ask Member Ingrao to move that, and Member Johnson to second us receiving the minutes. Is there anyone opposed to us doing that? Seeing none, thank you very much. We have no motions this morning. Are there any notices of motion that anyone wishes to bring forward today? Seeing none, we're going to step into new business and let us move to our CAO, Chandra. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Chair Foster and two members. I have three very short updates. One is the Climate Change Summit. NPCA is pleased to be collaborating with Niagara Region and Brock University on the inaugural Niagara Region Climate Summit, which is being hosted on June 28th. This year's theme is Collaborating for Sustainable Future and aims to bring a broad range of stakeholders together for collective action and commitment to advocate for climate change action in our jurisdiction. We are currently working with our partners on the details of this event. It is an invite-only event at this point and will be streamed for the community. More details to come. My second presentation is that NPCA, it's on the Great Lakes initiative between Canada and the United States. As you know, Conservation Ontario is engaged with all levels of government on those broader initiatives. NPCA has been appointed to represent Conservation Ontario on the Lake Ontario Partnership Committee. It's related to the Great Lakes Water Quality Agreement, Annex 2. Both Canada and the United States are representing on this committee and do collaboration around Great Lakes water quality. This past week, I attended my first meeting. I have been a representative on this committee when I was at the Toronto Region Conservation Authority. Conservation authorities continue to support multi-governments, both the provincial government and federal government, through their on-the-ground work, our monitoring efforts, and collecting data for these initiatives and supporting the reports. We are the lead implementation agency, as you heard from Natalie this morning, on the remedial action plan. That project has made significant progress here under that leadership, and thank you to all the committee members who've helped Natalie and our partners, Niagara Parks Commission. That work continues to support this broader initiative. I'm also pleased to report that the federal government has decided to host the next Great Lakes Forum in Niagara, and we will be helping them host this in Niagara Falls and supporting this initiative through a side event, probably a tour of great NPCA work that has been happening on the ground. My third update is about the Conservation Authorities Act, and as some of you may know, Phase 2 regulations and policies under the Conservation Authorities Act have been released by the province in April. This regulation relates to Conservation Authorities' budget, levy apportionment, and fee policies. As per my earlier report in February at the board meeting, if you remember, this set of regulation builds on what is already working really well with municipalities and conservation authorities. The regulation is not overly prescriptive, allowing us some flexibility to work on different aspects of our budget and levy apportionment with municipal partners. Some key aspects of this regulation includes clarity on definitions and terminology on levy apportionments, fee classes, things that conservation authorities can charge a fee on, and confirms that the provincial appointee, the provincial agriculture appointee on Conservation Authority Board will not be voting on budgetary matters when budgets come to the board. Generally speaking, NPCA is ahead of the process in many aspects of this, and we've already made significant improvements over the past 2 years in our budget process, in our consultation with our municipal partners. We have completed a professional fee review of our parks, and we are using those numbers now for our park fees. Our planning fee review is ongoing, currently to be completed this year. That will be implemented towards the end of this year or early next year. overall, I can say we are ahead of the curve. We have implemented quite a few things that puts us in a very good position to, through this transition, to adhere to this regulation and bring it in conformity. I also should say that we are starting to consult our municipalities on the programs and services side of Conservation Authority transition requirements. And all this, these policies and regulations that have come into play now, the transition deadline is 2024, January 2024. So at this point, our budgets remain the same, and we'll be working with municipal partners on aligning the budgets and working on a memorandum of understanding and service level agreements to bring everything in conformity in time for the 2024 budget. Thank you again for your support, and staff are doing a tremendous amount of work. Summer is here, and really pleased to be working as a team with the board and staff in taking the organization where it should be. Thank you.
Thank you, Chandra. By the way, Chandra actually took a week's vacation back a few weeks ago, so I think well, she kind of took a week's vacation. Is there any other new business this morning? I do not see any coming into play. There's no closed session, so with that, I am going to adjourn this meeting. Have a great day, everyone.